Let's jump right into this explainer. When we look back at the origins of the United States, it's so tempting to just see a bunch of isolated, disconnected events. But the truth? History is a giant domino effect. So today, we're going to trace how nearly 4 centuries of American history played out as one massive, relentless chain reaction, where literally every single compromise directly fueled the next chapter. We'll be mapping out this journey across 5 distinct eras: colonies in the New World, the Revolution and the Constitution, manifest destiny and expansion, the Civil War, and finally, Reconstruction and its end. Part 1. Colonies in the New World. First contacts and the foundation of empires. To understand the fractures of the future, we really have to start with the chaotic collision of cultures right here in the New World. Just look at how quickly European pursuits of wealth and religious freedom got totally intertwined with the devastating displacement of sophisticated native societies, and of course, the introduction of chattel slavery. In just over a century, you go from Columbus inadvertently opening a frontier, to Jamestown struggling for profit, to the tragic arrival of the first enslaved Africans in Virginia, and the Puritans landing at Plymouth. It was a rapid, incredibly volatile foundation. 2 million. That is the staggering number of enslaved Africans brought to the Americas between 1751 and 1775 alone. To put that into perspective, this explosive economic growth permanently embedded slavery right into the colonial fabric. It was a crucial thread that, as we'll see, violently pulls the nation apart later on. Part 2. Revolution and the Constitution. Rebellion against the Crown. So let's move to the next era. It's kind of ironic, actually, how a victory in the global 7 Years' War planted the seeds for British defeat in North America. Great Britain thought it was perfectly justified in taxing the colonies to pay off their war debts. But for colonists used to economic freedom, this escalated blindingly fast from simple boycotts to open, deadly rebellion. You get the Stamp Act, the bloodshed of the Boston Massacre, the Boston Tea Party, until finally by 1775, shots are fired at Lexington. There was absolutely no going back. Then, in 1776, this single document changed the whole game. It completely transformed a regional dispute over taxes into a radical revolution for fundamental human rights. They weren't just demanding better treatment from the king anymore, they were fighting for their very right to exist as a sovereign nation. And somehow, against the most powerful empire on earth, George Washington took a disjointed colonial militia and forged them into a unified fighting force. But the real turning point? A vital military alliance with France. That crucial French intervention, combined with sheer American endurance, culminated in 1781 when they cornered the British and forced a final surrender at Yorktown. Now, this brings us to the nation's first great political pivot. See, the early states were bound by the Articles of Confederation, which were incredibly weak. They couldn't even handle basic domestic unrest. Realizing they desperately needed a stronger core, they went back to the drawing board and drafted a powerful new constitution, built on a brilliant yet super delicate system of checks and balances. But you have to ask yourself, how long could a fragile compromise like this actually last? To get all those fiercely independent states to ratify the Constitution, the delegates made massive compromises. Most notably, they compromised on the existence of slavery itself. If we're tracking our chain reaction, this decision essentially just kicked the can down the road in the name of unity, delaying an absolutely inevitable catastrophe. Part 3. Manifest Destiny and Expansion. From Sea to Shining Sea. That delay back east allowed the young nation to turn its gaze westward, driven by a seriously ravenous hunger for land. Americans became completely enamored with this concept of manifest destiny. It was this powerful ideology that justified an aggressive, sweeping expansion, basically pushing aside any native tribes or sovereign nations that happened to be in the way. The sheer scale of this expansion was mind-boggling. The Louisiana Purchase doubled the nation's size overnight. But this relentless hunger led to incredibly dark chapters, like the 1830 Indian Removal Act, which forcibly displaced over 60,000 Native Americans. Add in the annexation of Texas and the end of the Mexican-American War, and the U.S. had swallowed up massive swaths of territory in just a few short decades. $187 billion. That is the astronomical modern value of the gold mined during the California Gold Rush. It's just wild. Discovered right as the U.S. took California in 1848, this massive economic explosion sent Western settlement into hyperdrive, blowing past everyone's expectations. Part 4. The Civil War. A nation fractured. But remember that cause and effect we talked about earlier? Every single new state added out west
severely threatened to break that fragile truce back east. The addition of all that new territory turned into literal battlegrounds. The big question was, would the agrarian, slaveholding economy of the South or the free labor economy of the North dominate? When it was left up to settlers to decide if new states like Kansas would allow slavery, things got extremely violent, leading to the brutal conflict known as Bleeding Kansas. The tension was just ratcheting up. John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry polarized the country even further. Finally, the election of an abolitionist president, Abraham Lincoln, pushed polarized Southern states to finally secede. By April 1861, Confederates fired on Fort Sumter. The dominoes had officially fallen, igniting the deadliest conflict in American history.
What started as a war simply to preserve the Union transformed completely. It became a campaign of total destruction aimed right at the heart of the Southern economy. You see, Lincoln shifted the moral goal of the war in 1862 with the Emancipation Proclamation, which led to the enlistment of black troops. And by the end, Union commanders like Sherman waged a total war campaign to completely break the Confederacy's will to fight by ending slavery. 600,000. That devastating number represents the lives lost before General Lee finally surrendered to General Grant in the spring of 1865. The country had literally torn itself apart, paying a staggering price in blood to answer those hard questions they left unresolved way back in 1787. Part 5. Reconstruction and its end, the unfinished reunion. So, the gunfire had ceased, but the battle for the political and social soul of the nation was really just getting started. In the wake of Lincoln's assassination, the federal government enacted 3 monumental amendments to basically reshape Southern society and protect newly freed black citizens. The 13th abolished slavery, the 14th granted birthright citizenship, and the 15th guaranteed voting rights regardless of race. But this era of profound reform faced immense violent pushback. Despite President Grant actually wielding the military to fight white supremacist terrorism like the KKK, political exhaustion in the North eventually doomed these efforts. By 1877, the momentum had completely faded. Which brings us to the Compromise of 1877, a pretty devastating political bargain. Basically, in exchange for the presidency, Northern Republicans agreed to withdraw federal troops from the South. And just like that, they abandoned federal protections for black citizens, effectively ending Reconstruction and leaving them to face a century of systemic oppression and the Jim Crow era. As we wrap up this explainer, we really have to recognize that the American story is an ongoing chain reaction. The unresolved compromises of the past don't just disappear. It leaves us with a pretty powerful question. How much of our modern world is still shaped by dominoes that fell over a century ago? Thanks so much for exploring this history with me. Keep learning, and always keep looking for those hidden connections.